I caught her red-handed before she even realized I was watching. The HOA president, clipboard in hand, tiptoeing across my lawn like she owned the place. My jaw dropped. This wasn't some harmless visit or a polite inspection. She had crossed the line. She was measuring my grass, stepping over flower beds, and jotting notes as if I had no right to even breathe on my own property. That's when I knew things were about to get messy. It all started innocently enough. I'd just finished mowing, the sun reflecting off the freshly cut grass. The kind of lawn that makes neighbors nod with envy. I'd always done everything by the book. Taxes, HOA fees, even that ridiculous rule about the height of the mailbox. But apparently, nothing I did could stop Patricia Hendris, the self-appointed enforcer of our neighborhood rules. She had a reputation for escalating the tiniest complaint into a full-blown confrontation, and now she was literally invading my yard to take matters into her own hands. I stepped out onto my porch, trying to stay calm. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, voice steady, but inside I was boiling. She jumped, clearly not expecting me to be home. She stammered, trying to act casual. But her clipboard betrayed her. "Measurements of my lawn? Who does that?" "You, just making sure everything complies with the HOA standards," she muttered, eyes darting like a guilty child caught stealing candy. I couldn't believe the audacity. My property, my rules, my peace of mind. And here she was, acting like a detective in my own backyard. I knew I had to act fast. This wasn't just about grass length. This was a power play, a test of how far she could push me. And I wasn't about to let some overzealous HOA president think she could intimidate me without consequences. I started filming discreetly, making sure to capture every step, every scribble, every smirk that suggested she felt untouchable. Evidence, I reminded myself. Because in situations like this, proof is your best weapon. As she finally noticed the camera, her confident posture faltered. This is nothing," she stammered, trying to reclaim control. But the damage was done. I had the proof, and I had the resolve. If she thought trespassing and measuring my lawn would go unpunished, she was about to find out the hard way. And just like that, I realized this was bigger than a lawn dispute. It was about accountability, respect, and making sure someone who abuses authority finally faces consequences. Little did Patricia know, her job and reputation was now teetering on a knife's edge, all because of a few innocent-looking blades of grass. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia Hendris wasn't going to let this go quietly. She had stormed off my yard the day before, but I knew her type, someone who thrives on confrontation, who sees rules as weapons rather than guidelines. By mid-morning, my mailbox was stuffed with a formal-looking HOA letter, marked urgent. My heart sank, but I kept my cool. I had already anticipated this move. The letter was a masterpiece of intimidation disguised as concern. It claimed my lawn allegedly violated some obscure height regulation, exactly the type of technicality she loved to weaponize. The irony was delicious. She had literally trespassed to measure the grass. Yet now she was sending me warnings like a legal expert. I read it twice, then 3 times, making sure I understood every loophole she thought would trap me. I decided to fight smart. First step, gather evidence. I pulled out my discreet video from the previous day and documented the timestamps. I also took high-resolution photos of my lawn from multiple angles, every inch perfectly maintained, every flower intact, every blade of grass compliant with the stated HOA standards. I was building my case, brick by brick, while Patricia was already preparing her next move. By early afternoon, I heard the familiar hum of her car outside my house. She wasn't subtle, never subtle. She strutted onto the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, radiating the same confidence as before. This time, however, I was ready. I greeted her calmly at the edge of my property line, giving her a polite but firm boundary. "Patricia, if you have questions, we can discuss them here. I don't appreciate you entering my yard without permission," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might back down. But no, she squared. her shoulders and began lecturing about rules and community standards, oblivious to the growing crowd of neighbors now peeking through their windows, curious about the commotion. That's when I realized something crucial. Her overreach wasn't just a personal affront. It was public, and the more visible she became, the more vulnerable she exposed herself. I calmly presented my evidence, photos, videos, and even timestamps from my security camera, showing beyond doubt that she had trespassed. Her confident smile faltered, replaced by a tight-lipped glare. She tried to argue, but every word stumbled against the mountain of proof I had meticulously gathered. For the first time, Patricia Hendris seemed human, fragile even, and I knew her actions had just put her career and credibility at risk. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Word was spreading, and people were starting to question her methods. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my lawn anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of overreach that could no longer be ignored. By the following day, the situation had escalated faster than I expected. Patricia Hendris, the ever-confident HOA president, was now visibly rattled. I could sense it in the way she avoided eye contact when neighbors passed by and the subtle hesitation in her voice during the few conversations she attempted. The news of her trespassing incident had spread quietly but effectively. People were talking. Neighbors, who had once nodded politely, now whispered behind their curtains, questioning her judgment and authority. I decided to take a more proactive approach. It wasn't enough to simply defend myself. I needed to hold her accountable. I contacted the HOA board, presenting them with my evidence, time-stamped videos, photos, and detailed accounts of the incident. My tone was professional, calm, and unwavering. I didn't attack her character. I focused solely on the facts. Still, I could sense the ripple effect. The board members, many of whom had been wary of challenging her, now seemed concerned, almost shocked by the extent of her overreach. Meanwhile, Patricia was scrambling. She sent an email attempting to explain her actions, full of vague justifications and legal jargon. But the words rang hollow against the tangible evidence I had presented. I could almost hear the frustration in her typing. Every carefully chosen phrase seemed designed to save face rather than acknowledge wrongdoing. I saved the email as part of the growing dossier, knowing it would only reinforce the truth of the situation. That evening, I noticed a subtle shift in the neighborhood dynamic. Neighbors approached me cautiously, thanking me for standing up against her overreach. It was strange, almost surreal, to feel the collective acknowledgement of people who had once avoided conflict at all costs. I realized Patricia's unchecked authority had been a silent burden for many, and now her actions were exposing the vulnerability in her leadership. I decided it was time to push further, but strategically. I invited a couple of board members to my house, under the pretense of a casual conversation about community concerns. Once there, I presented my evidence systematically, highlighting not just my case, but the broader implications of a leader who disregards boundaries. By the end of the discussion, it was clear Patricia's credibility had crumbled. What had started as a minor trespassing incident had turned into a legitimate investigation of her conduct. As night fell, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The seed of accountability had been planted, and the momentum was undeniable. Patricia Hendris had underestimated me and the neighborhood, and now the consequences of her actions were no longer avoidable. My lawn, once just a patch of grass, had become the battleground for fairness, respect, and integrity. I knew the final chapter was coming. Patricia would either face repercussions or attempt a desperate move to reclaim control. Either way, the next day promised to be decisive. The next morning, the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Word had spread that the HOA board was reviewing Patricia Hendris's conduct, and curiosity mixed with anticipation filled the air. As I stepped outside, I noticed neighbors lingering near their driveways, exchanging knowing glances. It felt like the calm before a storm, but I was ready. This wasn't just about a lawn anymore. It was about accountability, and I intended to see it through. Patricia arrived, clipboard in hand, but her confident stride had disappeared. She moved cautiously, eyes scanning the street for witnesses, and her usual commanding tone was replaced with a thin veneer of civility. "Good morning," she muttered, avoiding direct eye contact. I greeted her politely but firmly, letting her know that any attempt to trespass again would be documented and reported immediately. The power dynamic had shifted, and she knew it. By mid-morning, a few board members arrived at my house. They had reviewed the evidence I'd submitted and were prepared to confront her. Patricia attempted to explain herself, citing obscure rules and procedural loopholes. But every excuse fell flat against the concrete proof. Timestamps, videos, and a clear record of her trespassing. I stayed silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. As the board members exchanged glances of growing concern, the discussion was tense but decisive. The board made it clear that Patricia's actions had violated both HOA regulations and basic property rights. They announced that an official reprimand was being issued, and further violations could lead to her removal from the position. I could see the realization dawn on her face. Her authority had crumbled, her reputation in the neighborhood tarnished, and her job now precarious. After the meeting, the neighborhood atmosphere felt transformed. Neighbors approached me one by one, expressing relief and gratitude. "We were always afraid to speak up," one neighbor admitted. "Thank you for standing your ground." It was a powerful reminder that one person's courage can ripple through an entire community, inspiring others to reclaim their own sense of security and respect. As for Patricia Hendris, she left quietly that afternoon, avoiding further confrontation. The clipboard, once a symbol of her control, now seemed almost comical in her hand. She had underestimated the importance of boundaries, respect, and accountability, and the consequences were immediate. Her job was no longer guaranteed, and her authority had been irreversibly weakened. Looking at my lawn, I couldn't help but smile. What had started as a simple act of mowing had turned into a victory for personal rights and neighborhood integrity. It was proof that standing firm, calmly, strategically, and with evidence can dismantle even the most overbearing authority. My grass was still perfect, but the bigger win was the lesson. That respect and accountability must always be defended, no matter how small the battleground may seem. The fight was over, but the impact would be felt for a long time. Patricia Hendris had learned the hard way. Some lines should never be crossed. If you enjoyed this wild HOA showdown and want to see more stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a crazy neighborhood moment. Drop a comment below telling us what you would do if someone tried to trespass on your lawn. And don't forget to smash that like button if you think standing up for your rights is always worth it.